Hello, in this video, I'm going to talk about how to conduct a literature review. So in the last two videos, I discussed why we conduct the literature review, why is it important? But now let's talk about how we actually conduct the literature review when you get to that point. So you want to start by identifying keywords that you can search for. So now you have your research question, you know, well, at least your first version of it before you've searched the literature. But you have an idea of the topic that you want to study and the question that you want to answer. So now try to determine some keywords that you can use to search the databases. And I'll talk about the databases in just a moment. You can also get help in identifying your keywords by looking at other papers, so other research studies or your textbooks, or you can find relevant keywords by looking in those places, especially if it's an area of research where there are very specific words that are commonly used in study of that topic. So look for keywords in the papers that you're going to find while you're doing your literature review, and you can add those keywords as you go and as you conduct your review. So once you've got at least a place to start, you've got some keywords, then you will use those to search the databases, which we'll talk about on the next slide. Then from your search and what you find in your databases, then you want to narrow it down to maybe 50 research reports or so that you find in articles or books or some combination of those sources. So you might find hundreds. It depends on what you're studying. You might find 5, you might find 100, you might find 500. So it depends on what exactly you're studying and how much that topic has already been studied. But you want to find all of the relevant studies that have been done. And when I say relevant, I mean that are related to your research question, related to the topic that you want to study, and that probably came up when you searched for those keywords. So narrow it down to maybe 50 that you think are going to be the most useful and are the most relevant out of the ones that you found. Then take those 50 and kind of condense it even further and find the most specific, most central studies that are maybe similar to the study that you're doing, or that provide the most support for why you need to do your study or why your study is worthwhile. So find, of your 50, find the ones that are the most central to your topic. Now 50, that's kind of an estimate. It's a rough number. It might be more than that, it might be less. And when it comes to boiling that down to even fewer that are the most central, maybe you can't go less than 50 and still communicate your points and provide support. Or maybe you only need 10 or maybe 15, I don't know. So there's no magic number. It depends on what you're studying and what research has already been done and is available for you to draw from in your literature review. Then once you have the most relevant studies that you want to refer to in your research proposal or your paper, then you can design a literature map. Again, I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. And then draft summaries of the relevant articles. So you're going to take those articles that you've chosen as being the most central and most important, and you're going to summarize those. So we'll walk through step by step here. All right, so search in the databases. So once you have keywords, at least some to start with, and you might add more as you're looking through the literature, you're going to use those keywords to search different databases. So access to journal articles, conference abstracts, and dissertations. So those are types of things that you'll find through different databases. There are many different ones. Some you need a paid subscription for. Others are open access and free for everyone. And if you are a student or you're working at an institution, you often are given free access to the paid subscriptions through the institution. So if you are a student or you work in some facet of academia or research, then make sure that you look at your library at your institution, because you probably have many paid subscriptions to all sorts of journals and databases. that you might have to otherwise pay for if you're searching outside of your access at your institution. So that's a really valuable resource. But even so, if you have no access through an institution, there's still databases like ProQuest, Google Scholar. I love Google Scholar. If you're not familiar, just go to regular Google and search for Google Scholar, and it will bring up a whole different search engine that's still Google, but it will filter for you and find only scholarly articles. So you can't always get full access through Google Scholar, but it is a good place to start. And so you can use Google Scholar, PubMed, ProQuest, all sorts of different databases. And in some areas of study, in some areas of research, there are specific databases for specific areas. So some are a bit more broad and others are more specific. So you're going to want to find multiple databases and search with your keywords and your expanding list of keywords to find papers in different databases, because different databases will contain different papers. So you can't just go to one and think that that's an exhaustive search of what's out there, because there might be things in PubMed that are not found through Google Scholar and vice versa. And especially if you have paid subscriptions through your institution, then you'll find even more searching that way. So make sure that you're trying multiple databases so that you're really finding the available literature in your area of study. So you want to find the articles related to your topic and use terms from those articles to continue your search. So maybe you have exhausted your search on the original keywords that you came up with, but as you're going through and you're reviewing all of these different articles, maybe you found 10 more keywords that you want to try searching that might be specific to the area of study, or keywords that you just didn't think of before. So keep adding those keywords to your list and continue your search, because the goal is to find all of the relevant, or as many of the relevant studies as you possibly can. Now, also, it's important that as you are doing your search, that you are pulling up the full texts of the articles. It is not enough to just read the abstract. You need to find the full text so that you can read the whole thing and see what their methodology was like, see what their results were like, how did they do their analysis. So you need to be able to read through all of those different components, because in some cases, they might give you ideas for how you could design your methodology, or how you could do your data analysis when you get to that point. So you might get ideas. It also is a way for you to check whether you think, do you agree with the findings of each study? Do you agree with how the methodology was done, or are there major flaws? Like, you can't see those flaws and you can't analyze the methodology or anything like that if you don't have access to the full text and take the time to read it and determine whether you think that this was a well done study and you can really take the results at face value, or maybe there were biases or other flaws in the methodology that should maybe make you question what the conclusions say in that study. So you want to prioritize by source. So as you are doing your search and you're picking out, your 50 or so articles or entries in books and things that you want to include in your literature review, prioritize based on where they come from. So you might want to start with a broad synthesis like an encyclopedia, if it's something that you're very new to. So if you are trying to study something that you just don't know much about to begin with, then you need to start with some foundational information so that you have a foundation to work from and understand the rest of the literature that you're going to read about that topic. Because it's going to be hard to understand the research on a topic if you are not familiar enough yet with that topic. So it could be that you're invited in to work on a research project, or there's all sorts of ways that you might get involved in research. And if you're being invited in on something and you're not very familiar, start by familiarizing yourself. So that's a good place to start. So it could be encyclopedias, textbooks, that sort of thing, to just learn about the topic. Then we're going to go to journal articles from peer-reviewed journals. So that's where the databases come in. So those databases are full of peer-reviewed journal articles from all sorts of different journals. And so those are really going to be your best sources of information, because that's where you're getting the full reports of the different research studies that have been done that are related to your topic. After that, you might want to draw from other books and things, but keep in mind that the books are not going to be, they're not going through the same peer review process as journal articles from peer-reviewed journals. Depends on what kind of book. Textbooks will have a much more expansive, extensive peer review process and the editing process. But all sorts of other books that are just written by an individual author, they may not be reviewed by anybody at all, and they could be self-published. They might not even be filtered by whether a publisher wants to publish it. So just be careful about what books that you draw from and who wrote them, were they peer reviewed, and so on. And then we could look for conference abstracts. So when somebody presents at a conference, they contribute an abstract about their study that then is published. And so those can be useful, but they're just abstracts. So they're not full-length journal articles where you get the full methodology and all of the information about the study. So you might find something interesting in conference abstracts, but be careful, there's limited information. And it's hard to gauge whether it was sound methodology or there were biases or anything like that. And then you can look at dissertations. So dissertations are also found through searching in different databases. So dissertations are long, long drawn out explanations of research study that different PhD students do as part of their doctoral programs. And so you get, it's sort of beginner work because it's still student work that they're completing as part of earning their PhD. But the students have spent years on it and have really dug deep into the literature and written chapters about that study. So sometimes a dissertation can be a really deep kind of treasure trove of information about a topic because that student has already done the legwork of reviewing the literature on a certain topic. So it can be helpful. You can find not only information in the dissertation and use it as a source, but you also might want to look at their list of references if it's a topic that's very similar to yours. You could look at their list of references and go to those references directly, go to those papers directly. And really, you can be doing that with all of the journal articles and all of these different sources that you're looking at. If you find something that's especially relevant to what you want to study, look at their list of references and look at those papers and see if there's any of those that haven't come up in your search yet that you do want to include in your literature review. Now, last on the list here would be stuff you find on the internet. So beware. So there might be reports and things that you find online in different sources, but use discrimination, be careful, consider the source and where it was published, why it was published, who it was published by, is it peer reviewed? Is it maybe a media outlet where they're presenting research, but very often the media kind of puts a spin on what somebody else's research. So I don't recommend it. It's not a great place to look for good quality scientific information. Look to the journal articles, peer-reviewed journal articles for that. I have so many stories about when a researcher conducted good original research, and then some media outlet, it could be some magazine or who knows what, they want to write about that article or about that research, and they totally twist the findings and the conclusions, and they state the conclusions with so much more confidence really than the researcher ever would have stated it. So just be very careful about the science and the information that you're consuming on the internet, and just be very aware of what the motivations are of whatever that site is, where they got the information. Are they the original author? Like, are they the original researcher who conducted the research, or are they someone else writing an article about someone else's research? So be careful and be aware of what you're reading there. So you are going to take all of this that you've compiled and boil it down to just those that are the most central to your topic. Okay, so maybe you started with 50, maybe you started with 200, who knows? And then you're going to whittle it down until you have the most relevant that you know you want to mention in your proposal, and that are contributing the most and guiding you on developing your own research question and hypothesis. So once you have that, you can design a literature map. So a literature map is a visual summary of existing research on a topic. Now there's so many ways that you can do this. So I recommend just doing it in whatever way makes sense in your own head. You don't need to conform this into somebody else's kind of template of how to do this. Do it in a way that makes sense. So I put in the picture here, this is just an example of one version of a literature map. You could do it in a hierarchical pattern. So like where you're starting at the top and branching down into smaller and smaller topics. You could do a flow chart, you could do bubbles, you could do so many different things. One system that I recommend is if you write out the information for each of the articles or sources that you want to include in your literature review, write all of that out on just individual index cards. So like physically on index cards, write it out. So you have one paper on each card. And then you can kind of shuffle them around. You can lay them out on the floor or on the table and move them around in ways that make sense to you. And so that you can organize all the different papers. And you can even use like different colors, or like you could take your index cards and use different color pens on them, or different colors of index cards to group them by topic. So you're just arranging in whatever way makes the most sense, because you might have 50 papers that you want to talk about, and you need to come up with some way to organize all of that so that when you write your proposal or you write your paper, whatever it is that you're doing, you need to have a way that it flows and makes sense, and it's not just a big jumble of information that makes no sense to the reader. So you want to draft summaries of those articles that you plan to include. So if you're going to use the index card method, you can put your bullet points of summary information on those cards. That's my recommendation if you do it that way, but you can do it however you want. You can have a Word document or whatever you need to do, where you go study by study and summarize the important points. So for each article, you're going to want to include the problem, the central purpose, what population or sample did they use, review the key results and major conclusions. So what did the researchers find from their study? And then if there were any methodological flaws or flaws in their reasoning or logic, or any major biases or conflicts or anything that maybe you determined as you're analyzing and reading that paper, then you're going to want to include those in your summary too. So you really could just do an index card and bullet point each of these items for each paper on their own index cards, and then just lay them out and put them into whatever arrangement makes the most sense to you, so that they're grouped by topic, or that they're grouped by maybe how you want to use those papers to support the importance of your study, or whatever points that you want to make in your proposal. You can group these different articles by how they're going to help you to make your points. All right, that's all I have for you in this video. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you for the next one.